All right, welcome everyone to our last installment of our Proud to Work series. Today we have a very special session for you about claiming your identity in job search. If you've been with us the last 2 weeks, you know that these workshops have been put on through a collaboration of resources. The Metro State Career Center and the Women's and LGBTQ Resource Center have partnered with Mossier to make these events happen. Today's workshop is extra special because we get to hear directly from Nick Alm, the Executive Director of Mossier. I want to let everyone know that today's workshop is being recorded. If you'd like to keep your video off or change your name for any reason, please feel free to do so. And if you missed any of our past workshops and you'd like to view them, please feel free to email me directly and I can share the recordings once they're all available. And I'll put my email in the chat. I'm Emily Johnson. I'm a career counselor in the Career Center. In the Career Center, we want to help all of our students and alumni find success in their careers. We're so happy to be a part of this series because we know that an essential piece of job searching is networking. Our event today and the Queer Career Fair, which Nick will tell us a little bit more about, are great opportunities for job seekers to start building their network. Before we get started, I'm going to pass off the spotlight to Sam to introduce herself and share our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Emily. So again, my name is Sam. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Women's and LGBTQ Student Services Coordinator here at Metro State. And before we get going, I'm going to do our land acknowledgement. So I want to begin today by honoring the Dakota and Anishinaabe people whose land we occupy. This land is unceded, meaning it was taken by force. And I invite each of us who are settlers or visitors to this land to become familiar with the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples and their vibrant lives and work. One way we can honor Indigenous peoples is to be aware of the issues they face, such as the epidemic that is missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits, and by standing with Indigenous communities and working to fight settler colonialism in our everyday lives. Reuniting and restoring Indigenous peoples to the land should be all of our collective goal. This is the definition of land back and the reason we do land acknowledgements. We currently reside on the stolen lands of Indigenous peoples, and we honor the physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual spaces we occupy. We are in the midst of a global pandemic and continued racialized violence, and recognize the immense power and privilege we hold in sharing our work with all of you today. Our histories are complicated, tangled, and filled with resilience of our ancestors from before and yet to come. We want to imagine spaces and places where we are liberated, transformed, and in solidarity together in struggle, imagination, and futures. And we wish you and our communities health, safety, slivers of joy, and care in the midst of uncertainty and trauma. So then we'll go ahead and hand it off to Nick Alm, who is the Executive Director of Mossier. Take it away, Nick.
Hey, everybody. How are we doing? Thank you, Sam and Emily and Bill and the whole Metro State team. I said it, I think, the past 2 weeks, but so grateful for this partnership with Metro State. I think out of everyone that Mossier's worked with, Metro State is serious about ensuring that your LGBTQ community has what they need to be successful in this career journey and beyond. And so we're going on 3 years now of events that we've hosted together. And as Sam mentioned, this is leading up to our big Queer Career Fair next week. We have over 70 employers that are signed up. This is now a semi-annual event that Mossier is doing to connect queer job seekers to the organizations that have really made the commitment to LGBTQ inclusion. We're not saying necessarily that all of these companies are perfect. Mossier works with about 200 different companies, and none of them are really saying that they've arrived, right? But we are saying that the group of employers that we're putting in front of students is serious about going beyond check the box diversity and inclusion, moving beyond that performative diversity and inclusion, or simply making statements or selling rainbow merchandise and not doing much beyond that, right? So Mossier is kind of that filter for job seekers to hopefully save you time and struggle and simplify the process of the job search overall, which is intense, as we'll talk about. And we will also talk about how intense it is to be queer in the job search today. So with that being said, I'm going to share my story with you today. I'm going to share, basically, I bulleted out every single thing that I've learned and witnessed and experienced as I've worked with hundreds of LGBTQ job seekers who have wrestled with big questions of how do I be out in the hiring process? Should I be out? How do I make that decision? How do I tell if an employer is LGBTQ inclusive? How much does it matter to me personally, right? Some people, it's a job, right? It's a means to an end, and we just want to get the check and get out, and that's okay too. So today is about folks on the call deciding for yourself where you are on your journey and what direction you're moving, and what authenticity means to you in the job search, what honesty and transparency means for you, and hopefully the number one thing I hope we walk away with, that if you get nothing else, we really want to develop that, I call it our sixth sense, our ability to feel in our gut, right? When we interact with somebody who sees us for who we are, sees the full breadth of who we are. Because as we'll talk about, it's getting harder and harder to tell which companies are at which points on the journey, because most organizations have figured out how to make things look nice on a website, and they've learned how to make things look nice on a brochure. And so what it's coming down to is you have to tell for yourself if you're walking away from interviews and recruiting opportunities feeling energized and uplifted, or if you're feeling wounded and wounded, I think, is the best word. And I'll explain more about what the difference is. But that's our high level overview for the day. I probably have 20 to 30 minutes of content, but really this is going to be an opportunity for you all to jump in and talk about your experiences, whether you're an ally or somebody who is LGBTQ. We just want to have a great back and forth today. Was there any, before, I always like to just ask before we start, were there any questions that people had up front that we want to make sure I get answered in my little talk here? Were there any questions about the topic before we dive into it, or how we feeling it right up front here? Feeling good? 7-second rule says no one asks a question in 7 seconds. It's time to move on. So the background I'll start with, I always start with my personal story because I think it's pretty relevant, obviously, to what we're talking about today, because my decision to actually start Mossier 5 years ago was born out of the experiences that I had as somebody trying to get hired as an LGBTQ person, and as somebody who is identifying as non-binary, as someone who's using they, them pronouns. Today, I've butched it up today. But yesterday I was doing a training with my lipstick on and my eyeliner and my, fun colors and my earrings and all these things. And I've always been somebody who has kind of transitioned back and forth in between and outside of gender constructs and gender boxes. And so that certainly was an issue, I think, for a lot of organizations. I went to a business school. I was very privileged to go to a business school that was very connected to the major employers in the Twin Cities and in Minnesota broadly. So business school for 4 years, it was all about getting a job. You went to school to get a job. You were going to school less to learn and more to get you prepared to jump into a Fortune 500 internship or a full-time Fortune 500 position. So that's what I did. That's what I thought I was supposed to do. And keep in mind, I wanted to be a music teacher first and foremost, but I thought that was too gay. As a high school student, I thought you can't be gay and a music teacher because that's too gay. So I went to business school. Okay. Going back, I maybe would have done something different, but I was managing the Dairy Queen in Stillwater at the time. And I thought I can manage a Dairy Queen. Might as well go to the Carlson School of Management and see what happens. So that's how I ended up in business. And by the time I got, 2 3 years in and wanted out, I was already, I was too deep. But I got to take some gender studies classes, some social justice classes, and realized where my passions, I guess, really lie. Now, in the hiring process, I would say, what is it like to be LGBTQ in your organization? This is in the year like 2014, 2015, right? I didn't think that was a a question that was out of line. I didn't think that that was a question that would be so difficult to answer by people who I thought were really nice and really great people. Did not experience overt discrimination necessarily, but when I would ask those questions, I got a lot of just awkward silence. We just would stare at each other for a minute, and you could tell their gears were turning like, did they just, what did they just say? Right? It was very uncomfortable. That was about 80% of my interactions with recruiters. 20%, had something nice to say about, we value all diversity. We respect you no matter what. We love gay people. We love diversity and inclusion. And I thought, okay, that's cool. But I would kind of turn my head and say, there's something off about that. There's something that's not quite there. And it wasn't until years later, I'll explain, that I was able to figure out what was kind of wrong with that experience. So I'm not having a good time in hiring. Keep in mind, it took a couple years of trying to get an internship, trying to get a full-time job to even have the courage to ask those questions. I remember the first time I did it, I was like shaking in my boots because I thought, oh my gosh, am I about to just say this? Am I about to just out myself, essentially? And one big thing that helped me was I had started the LGBT organization at the business school as a result of being so frustrated about this exact conversation and feeling like I was 20 years old. I don't see any queer people in business, period, at all. Even in higher education, even in nonprofit, because I figured out I didn't need to go work in corporate America. I started working at the Minnesota Orchestra. I did a food startup. I did some other things. I'm like, where are the queer people? Where are the openly queer people who can just give me, allow me to exhale, just have one exhale, that I am not alone, that this path is not just something that I'm blazing all on my own. It was a lonely road. So I'm calling that out in case I'm sure there are some people who feel a little lonely as you think about this process. We all go through it. And we're going to talk about how you can stand in your truth so that you don't feel those feelings of loneliness as much. But the big turning point was I went to a conference called Out for Undergrad. Out for Undergrad was the switch for me. It was a huge moment. Out for Undergrad is a national conference. They do 4 big conferences a year for students in technology, engineering, marketing, and business. If you're a student on the line, highly recommend looking at Out for Undergrad. They flew everybody out to Goldman Sachs headquarters in New York City. It was fancy, fancy, fancy. It was way beyond anything. I was used to being a small town Minnesotan whose, biggest vacation growing up was the cabin up in Brainerd, right? So here I am in the Big Apple and downtown Manhattan and just full of life, because I spent 48 hours with 300 queer people. And oh my gosh, exhale. I don't even know what the word is. It was way more than an exhale. It was realizing that I had this backpack on me. I had this bowling ball or 2 that was in my backpack that I had been carrying around. I can still feel I can feel my chest get kind of tight thinking about it, because it was this moment of like, is this what I'm experiencing day to day? Is this what I'm carrying around in terms of this fear, this always being on, this constant double consciousness, this ability to be constantly trying to live your life and then analyzing every room and every situation and every person to assess whether I was, in danger or not, right? Things that kind of I learned back when I was getting bullied as a little kid, right? That stuck with me. And you get so used to it by the time you're, in your 20s. So I realized when I experienced this real level of psychological safety, I was like, wow, that makes me angry. I'm angry. I was on the plane. I said, I am not going back to that. I am going to push these employers even more because I have a huge amount of privilege. For me, it wasn't about will I get a job. It was what job am I going to get, because I had all of this access that this conference had given me, that my school had given me, even though these weren't the type of things I was getting access to, wasn't what I wanted. I had access. I had a cushion. We'll talk about privilege, how to measure your privilege and make a decision about how much privilege you have in a minute. But I had a lot of it. I was white. I didn't have kids. I didn't have any dependents. Didn't have anybody who was going to suffer if I didn't get that job, didn't move forward professionally. So we come back as a nonprofit, and I say, we're going to help organizations recruit and retain LGBTQ talent. And we're not just going to do the recruitment thing from the standpoint of here's a bunch of queer people and here's a career fair and have at it, right? Yesterday, we had 150 recruiters on a Zoom call getting our LGBTQ recruiting training, talking to them about the things that I'm talking to you about today, to say, we're not going to require you to check any boxes, but here's the expectations, the expectation of inclusion that you're going to bring into this fair. So we work with employers to build those capacities so that they're not just coming in and taking advantage of our community, so that when they do hire queer people, those queer people stay for more than 18 months, right? Because we know we have a serious revolving door problem or retention problem, especially for the Black community, LGBT people of color. So all of that came together to produce Mossier. And here are the big things that I've seen. We launched our first big career fair in October of last year. And the questions that job seekers started to come forward with were, Nick, what does it mean to be authentic in the hiring process? What does that look like? What does that feel like? How do I dress? Do I actually go into this interview, with my makeup on, with my dress on, with my suit on, whatever it is, right? Can I express my gender the way I see fit? And here's what I kind of pulled out of all of our conversations with anxious job seekers is that first you have to set kind of a baseline understanding. Again, I said in the beginning that these organizations, most of them, they're not where we want them to be. There's really no workplace that has really cracked the code on this. There are some that are better than others. We'll talk about why that is. But we have to understand that we are walking into systems that were not designed for us. And I know we say that and we tweet those things, but we really have to take that out of the intellectual level and really internalize that we're kind of walking into a burning building most of the time, right? The way these systems were set up, they were designed to exclude us. So your existence, number one, you even having this thought of could I be out in a job, in an interview process, that's huge. That is so, so huge. That is the wildest dream of all of our queer ancestors who came before us, who lived totally in the closet, who feared every day of losing their livelihood, of getting blacklisted. Just the fact that we can even have this conversation is a revolution in and of itself. And I feel like if you can feel proud of that you are somebody who gets to make these choices, that's a good place to start. Ground yourself in that. Now, you're going to go into these interactions with employers. This might be via networking. This might be your informational interviews. This might be an actual interview. This might be at our career fair, one of your 15-minute appointment slots. What I always tell people is do your research up front, and I'll get to what that research looks like. But the research can only take you about 30% of the way. Beyond the research, you have to understand that this is a 50-50 game that you're playing. You're interviewing the organization just as much as they're interviewing you. Your questions and your concerns and your list of qualifications that you need is important. And I highly recommend that you spend some time writing those things down. These are the baseline things that I want out of an employer. I want to see leadership talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to have a manager that I can talk about my identity with. I want to have an organization where I can access quality healthcare that is going to support my journey as an LGBTQ person. Know your list of demands, right? And know which ones are must-haves and know which ones you can be a little bit flexible on. Once you do that, I think you have a bit of a compass to go into these conversations and say, okay, I have very tangible things that I can ask about from a benefit standpoint, from an employee resource group standpoint, from a policy standpoint, et cetera. Our community knows what exclusion feels like. We know it's harder though to kind of recognize what I call that kind of covert discrimination, right? No one's actively coming after you, but we've been in rooms where we can tell there's an elephant in the room. There's something that isn't being said. There's an unconscious bias. You can tell by the way somebody looks at you. And your job in those situations is just to breathe and really feel what that room is telling you, what those individuals you're interacting with in an organization are telling you. If you walk away and you feel like bad about yourself, if you feel like you were, in a sense, kind of misinterpreted, if you felt like you and the recruiter were missing each other, kind of ships in the night, like they were seeing you as a resume, but not as this whole person that is queer, that is all of your identities, that's a really good sign that it might be time to move on. And this is a larger problem in recruiting in general. Most recruiting is not human-centered. Most recruiting is not about, let's look at this whole person and look at their life story and figure out, what skills have you developed as a result of your identities and experiences, and how does that also get factored into whether or not we decide that you're going to work for us. That's not happening at most organizations. So if you know what it's like to not be seen, watch for those feelings. I just had a conversation with an immediate family member, for example, who has known I'm queer for 7-8 years. And, still to this day, it feels like such an awkward topic. It feels like, there's this elephant in the room when that topic gets brought up and we get kind of frozen around it. And we can't address it head on, right? And I said to this family member, I said, I don't think that emotionally, I don't know if you're prepared or willing, or if you're even able to go to the level where you can see me fully. So if you're trying to think about what this feeling feels like, think about those people in your life where you've said to yourself, you know what, this person's not capable of meeting me where I'm at as a queer person in my queer identity. Because I guarantee you, unfortunately, most of us probably have somebody like that in our life, whether it be a family member, a friend, a past friend, a former boss, former manager. So really think back and study and try and remember how tough that feels like, so you can better recognize it in the moment. You will feel like kind of like a rocket ship when you encounter people who have taken that inclusive behavior out of this philosophical, intellectual space. They've taken the elevator down to their heart and they really care about it, right? Maybe they don't get all the language right. Maybe they don't know enough about the pronouns thing. Maybe they don't have the best response for all of your questions, but you can tell when somebody has made our community a priority. You can tell when you're working with somebody who wants to see the full version of you. It is a night and day difference. That is when you start to say, okay, maybe I can make a compromise here. This is not, again, it's never going to be what I totally want, but this person is worthy of me and my time. Knowing that you're worthy going into this situation is obviously important. If you don't think that you're worthy of a good job, of a good living, that's going to get in the way, right? So you want to investigate that as well here. That's probably good. Worthiness could be a whole nother talk, but we won't go all the way there today. We know, Emily, when I talk to you, I can feel you in the way that you see me. I just, it's hard to explain, but when you know, right? That's why I love this partnership so much, right? Because I know that this is so much bigger than just, let's do this LGBTQ event. We understand here that this is a part of a much bigger story in our state, in our country, in our history, right? So those people are out there. And I think have faith and be optimistic that those people want to find you. I work with those people all the time. There are great recruiters out there. There are great people who, again, they're not going to be perfect. They're not going to have everything on your list, right? But the difference is certain kinds of people, you walk away, you feel like you got to go bandage a wound, right? You feel low energy. You feel like, ugh, I don't know what just happened there, but I didn't feel good about that interaction. And then there's other interactions we say, wow, I can see myself with this person. And so if this person is a representative of this organization, I'm going to take a shot and say that, this is going to be a better path for me. So know who you are. Just such a cliche thing to say. Know who you are so that it doesn't matter if somebody wants to see you or not. It's going to take probably years. I think I have to focus on this all the time as I go into companies and I pitch what I do, and I hear the word no probably 5% of the time. No, Nick, we don't want to work with you. It's hard to take that, hard to not take that personally when you're talking about all of these things that my team has created to help queer people, and somebody doesn't see the value in it. But over time, you get kind of punched enough. You get punched down, you get beat down by people who don't want to see you. And eventually one day you realize, you know what? Their inability to not see me has nothing to do with me. That doesn't have anything to do with me. That is their stuff. And I can be an observer of that and act accordingly. But I can stop taking the punch. I can just step to the side and let it miss me, right? Some of you might be at that point, knowing that you're going to fluctuate back and forth, but that's ultimately what you're working to. So if you walk in a situation, it's not a good one, you can say, okay, thank you for your time. Thank you for saving my time. Thank you for telling me and showing me exactly what's going on here, so that I don't get misled down a path I don't want to go down, which happens all the time to us. So to me, that is this authenticity thing. It's the know yourself. It is the trust your gut stuff. It is the believing that you deserve to have good opportunities in life, that you've earned them, that you've worked hard for them, and that those who don't want to see it are really just there to kind of guide you along your path and make sure that you keep going in the right direction. Now, that sounds really nice, right? It all sounds super cool, Nick. Yep, just know who you are and, listen to your heart and listen to your gut and everything will be okay, right? Obviously, everybody on the call today comes into the conversation with a varying level of privilege, right? Some people need a job and they need it now. It's a luxury to have this conversation in a way. Absolutely. It is absolutely a privilege to even think that you might be able to be picky about where you work with, who you work for. So I totally acknowledge that. And for the folks in the room who are more on that spectrum of, Nick, I don't have the privilege to, put on lipstick and walk into an interview and risk, somebody intentionally or unintentionally discriminating against me. If that is you in the room, know that there are other people who are going to hold it down for you until you get to a point where that is possible, if that's something you want to do. Know that there are other people who are going to carry the torch. I put so much pressure on myself to be out all the time. And that was draining. That was so exhausting. and not knowing the ground rules of self-care, not knowing what burnout feels like, right? It's really quick to overdo it. And this struggle of, waking up every day and deciding, do I want to be all of me, or do I want to tone it down to minimize any potential issues? That question, day in and day out, is exhausting. And so be kind to yourself. Know your privilege. I think maybe here I'm speaking more so to the people who don't recognize how much privilege that they have, who don't recognize that they can be leaning in more. So, and asking these questions and showing employers, saying, wow, look, they're going back to the company saying, geez, have you realized like how many people are asking us about our commitment to diversity and inclusion and equity and justice? There are a lot of us out there who I think can take risks that maybe just aren't right now. And I totally understand why you wouldn't want to, but if that's you and you're listening to this right now, I just want to gently push you in that direction, if that's okay with you. Gently suggest that you can not only help yourself, but also open doors for other people by bringing your queerness to center stage. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to be out, and that's okay too. So I really don't want to sound like I'm giving a prescription or giving rules here. I hope that you're just taking all this in. My motto is take what you like and leave the rest. Okay, you have to know what makes sense for you here. So just give that quick disclaimer. I've got a few more minutes here. I just want to cover, being an LGBTQ researcher and somebody who can evaluate these organizations. And then I've got a couple notes on specific considerations for trans folks and non-binary people. And then I think that should be about it, but I'm just gonna scan my notes here. A few notes on, tactically speaking, let's get down to business here. What is actually needs to be a component of your journey to find a queer inclusive employer? We talked about the trust your gut stuff. We talked about, or we need to talk about, watching organizations long-term, looking at their activism, right? Follow the organizations you want to work for on social media, right? It's very easy to tell who made a statement after George Floyd and who has said nothing since. It's very easy to tell which companies are saying things during Pride Month, but they're not saying anything other months, right? Becky Yvonne, I love what the point she made last week about, look at specifically what they're doing on Black employees and trans employees, right? Those two groups are generally the best measure for other identities, because a lot of organizations are not tackling seriously the issue of trans inclusion. And a lot of organizations, when it comes to race, have really only focused on more cosmetic changes. And so looking at what organizations are doing for different identities is got to be a key part of your research to get the full picture. Does the website for the organization have stock photos of Black people who look way too happy? Okay, probably a red flag, right? Hopefully you know that you're looking at their real employees and not some, Shutterfly image. Look at whether or not a Pride campaign, for example, is connected to any sort of tangible advocacy. Are they making a donation? Are they, Moser just did a partnership with Caribou Coffee. They sold a Pride tumbler, right? And Moser received proceeds from the Pride tumbler, which is probably where most organizations would have stopped. But then they actually took it a step further and they said, actually, we're going to give all of our employees access to Moser's training and resource library for the rest of the year, so that all of their employees can go in and learn from our content, learn how to be great LGBTQ workplace inclusion leaders, right? Okay, now that's that next level. There's something really tangible the organization has committed to beyond just a basic marketing campaign. So always kind of look under the hood, like, what is the point of this thing that you're selling? What is the point of this campaign? When you make a statement, are you actually saying the words racism, white supremacy, homophobia? When you make a statement, is it actually referencing the tangible things that your organization is doing to rebuild systems with an equity lens, right? Those are the key details that you're looking for. And it's going to take you some repetitions, right, to start to be able to parse those apart, because secret is a lot of these organizations, they've gotten very good at being able to say the right thing, being able to sound like they have got it going on. But over time, you start to compare them side by side, you can see that there are very subtle differences in word choice and in the level of specificity that they go to when describing what their commitment is to justice. So you, over time, will develop those comprehension skills. But certainly something that, again, going to take a minute, that is going to be a skill that's worth developing for sure, because you might be the person at your organization when you get hired that's actually going to help write those statements one day, or review them, or help the organization define their commitment. So it's a good skill to have regardless. Last few things here. Should you be out on a resume? Okay, kind of same principles apply here. Many of us are involved in LGBTQ organizations. Many of us are doing advocacy work. A lot of folks, it's referred to as whitewashing your resume, right? That's when people of color will change their name, use an American name as opposed to their real name. That's when they will remove certain experiences. They don't want vice president of the Black Student Union or the Queer Cultural Resource Center, whatever it is, they take those things off. So you have to make a choice about whether or not those things are going to be a part of your resume. I would have multiple options. I'd have a resume that is like your super queer resume, right? If this is you, I would have one that's more toned down. And again, based on what you're learning in these conversations at career fairs and other events, you can decide who gets to see the which version. And you don't have to feel pressured like every time I have to give this queered up resume, right? If you're feeling like, you know what, today I just can't do it. That level of vulnerability, I just can't do it today. I'm just gonna stick with, here's my resume that is toned down, right? Give yourself options to work with. Being out is a spectrum. Being out is something that, quite frankly, the concept is just pretty bizarre to me. It's just the fact that we even created this whole process of coming out, and all of these, we attach so many ideas to coming out that I think stress us out more than we need to, because we've made coming out such a big deal, and Facebook announcements and all these different things. But being out is just simply a choice about how to show up that works for you at the end of the day, if you want to use that as a simple definition. My last point to make, which always kind of throws people for a loop, is, don't assume. Try not to assume that, for example, a recruiter is not LGBTQ themselves. Try not to assume that because this organization is based in a rural location, that you're going to be a target of discrimination, right? Or if they seem to have a more politically conservative customer base, that try not to create ideas in your head about organizations before you've had the chance to engage, right? Give people the benefit of the doubt. It's less stressful for you if you don't build a narrative up in your head that this place might be discriminatory or whatever. Try to take a step back and try to operate from the assumption that the majority of people are baseline good. I think in life, the big choice we all have is whether we see people and institutions as baseline good or baseline bad. And I choose to view everybody as baseline good. I think there are good people who do bad things, who have bad mindsets sometimes, who behave in inappropriate ways, but that at the end of the day, they're good people. And moving through life with that viewpoint, in my opinion, this is my opinion now, this is not factual, I think that is going to create a smoother path for you. And as folks who have, many of us, been through it, who have been beat up along the way on our journey, that's hard. That's hard to say, Nick. Yeah, that's a really nice thought, but my life experience tells me that, you know, maybe people are baseline bad. I get that. I really get that. But the world is changing. I get to see it change every day. Again, I saw 150 incredibly engaged recruiters from 70 organizations yesterday who were so serious about getting this right. And I thought, there is absolutely hope that we can move beyond all of this, right? That we'll be the last generation that even has to have this conversation in this way. So that is the point that I want to end on. Baseline good, folks. Highly recommend it. And with that, I'd like to just open it up and see if any of this is hitting you in any particular kind of way. What if you had an aha moment, let's talk about it. If you had said, Nick, I think what you said over there was total BS, let's talk about that too. So wherever you want to go with this, I just wanted to leave some time for us to hash this out, because this is a complicated conversation.
People can put questions in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself. And I would just echo what Sam added into the chat, that thank you, Nick, and that was amazing.
Thanks for giving me the mic.
Yeah. A question I have that I'd love for you to speak to is just more about how folks on the call could participate in the Queer Career Fair, because I think today you've given them some like mental tools, but what's a practical tool, or what can that look like for a job seeker?
Mm-hmm. Can we have another hour, Emily? Can we?
No. I did put the registration link into our chat, which I can put again so people have quick access to it.
Yeah, you know, let's see here. Well, first of all, Mossier, when you register, we are actively building our content and helpful resources around all of this. So we've got articles on navigating the conversation about am I out, all the way down to the way more technical aspects of, you know, how do I, we've got email templates for somebody that you want an informational interview with, right? Log in, when you get your, when you sign up, you get your login, you go in, go to the resources, take a look at that, because we've tried to simplify the process as much as possible for you. We've got email templates for following up after an interview or after the career fair. I think as you prepare, if you're somebody who's going next week, I think do your homework, find out who are the top 5 organizations that you want to meet with. Get your research done, like we talked about. Make sure you book the time, because we do. This is not like kind of a, what do you call it? We don't have walk-in rooms at the Queer Career Fair. You book 15-minute appointment slots, and those appointment slots are going to start going up starting Monday. So it is very much a kind of first come, first served situation. So just being out ahead of the game a little bit. Our platform allows you to message recruiters directly. So I'd highly recommend, if you really want to, you know, put that best foot forward, say you book your time with the recruiter, and you can go to their profile and you can connect with them and message them and say, hey, so-and-so, really excited to talk to you on Thursday. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Nick. I use they, them pronouns. Here's my profile. Your profile will have your resume where you upload it. All your information's there too. So they can give you a little peek before they, so that Thursday you can, hopefully in your 15 minutes, you can go to a deeper level than just getting all of those formalities, spending too much time on that. So that would be my comments for prep. The actual 15 minutes itself, have an elevator pitch. And I hate the word elevator pitch because that makes people stressed out. Prep about yourself in under 60 seconds and what you share. And practice, practice, practice. Phone a friend, call your mom. You know, Emily, I'm sure you do, right? You've got resources galore here that Metro State provides to help you practice that elevator pitch. You gotta have a good elevator pitch. Brand matters. It's a little, I know it kind of, if you're like, I don't have a brand, but you do have a brand. And you need to know how to talk about yourself so that people can know you. You got your elevator pitch. You've got 2 maybe scripted questions, either about the LGBTQ inclusion situation, or you've looked at the job board, you've seen which positions that the company has open. Bring specific questions about the jobs you're interested in so that they can either say, oh, actually, I'm not the right person to talk to. You need to go book time with this person. Or you can actually get into, you ideally want them to tell you, oh, you'd be great for this job, apply. Or they'll say, actually, you know, I can tell you right now, this job is not for you. Maybe check out this job. That is what you're trying to accomplish next week, is like, where do I apply? When do I apply? Are these positions actually open? Because job boards don't always have positions that are open. And we're working on that with our employers, but they aren't always the best about that. So then after the fact, the last thing I'll say about post-career fair, right? You've got the platform, apply for the jobs that you have learned about, that you have feel after the fair are the right fit for you. Message the individual and let the recruiter and let them know that you've applied, and thanks for talking. Thanks for giving me the time to share my story, right? And hopefully then ask for their email. Totally okay to ask for their email to follow up if they'd be willing to do that. And then I would say on a weekly cadence, I recommend, this is kind of up to you, but on a weekly cadence, ping your people and just say, hey, just want to check in and let you know that I'm still really interested in this job. Do you know anything at this point about where you're at in the process, or when decisions are going to be made about interviews? Those types of questions are totally fair, and I say be persistent, be almost borderline. You can be a little annoying. That's, I think for most people that shows, okay, great, this person wants a job, right? Lean in there and make sure that your name is at the top of their mind. So I don't know, Emily, that was a lot, but what are you telling folks these days, I guess?
Similar. So our first workshop we had with this series, we had employers who really wanted to have the candidates apply before the fair. And I really appreciated that advice as well, because what we learned from those employers is if you've already applied, then they can start moving your application along in that 15-minute window that they have in the fair. So when you get into the platform and you see employers that are already there, if some you already know are places you want to work, you can put the extra effort out before the event happens.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Thanks for that overview, because I think it's a phenomenal event and your last one was such a success. So I'm excited to have more job seekers at this one as well. Yeah. And if anyone wants help with their resume beforehand, you have some help within the Career Center.
Love that. And Emily too. So the other thing that we're going to try, I don't know what you think, but we're kind of seeing that career fairs, I don't know, are they going to be the future? Because Mossier's, obviously we're working with small nonprofits that have one open position all the way up to Fortune 500 companies that have 2,000 open positions. So what we're envisioning at Mossier long-term to help job seekers is companies will have ongoing office hours. So you can come back and book time and network and do informational interviews 365 days a year. And moving in more of like a social hiring network format. But I don't know if you're hearing what you're thinking about career fairs these days, but I just am getting mixed reactions from employers about whether they work or not. I don't know.
Yes, and I think as employment trends change, opinions change, I think the conversation we're having a lot of is about in-person or virtual. If there's value in doing both or either for events. Lots will change. One thing we know for certain is that change will always happen.
That's the fun part about working in career services and career readiness, is it is always changing.
Yes. Other questions for Nick?
I was just going to say fantastic talk, lots of great insights, and thanks for sharing your personal journey with us all. It was really fantastic. And congratulations on the blazing success of your company. How old is it? A couple of years?
Yeah, so I mean, we started 5 years ago in May when I was a student, and I've been full-time for 3.5 years. Yeah.
Impressive. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. It's hard to believe, honestly, when you look at that, because you just didn't, I don't know. For a long time, you just thought, do people really care about this? I mean, it's such a trip. The timing of it all is very lucky. I feel like in the last year, especially, we've seen a opening of Pandora's box, and we're definitely riding a wave that a lot of, primarily BIPOC individuals built over decades in the business world, and now that door is kind of flying wide open. So, which is also forcing us to think very critically about our role and where do we fit in and what's our voice and when is it appropriate for us to speak up on different topics, and who gets to profit from this work and how much. All those things are becoming very, now that we have a DEI industry, that it is becoming an industrial complex. It's getting kind of sticky to navigate.
Hey, Nick, Labar Spence, I work with Bill and Emily.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, it crossed my mind that if you want to show up to an interview as yourself, but you're feeling the pressure because you're concerned about what might happen, and that added pressure of wanting to be authentic, but afraid to be authentic means I should be authentic. Now I've added another layer of angst to the process. So do you have a thought about that sort of a pressure and shoulds?
Yeah, I don't like the word should for anything. I try to remove that. Okay, Labar, I want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. So you're talking about just the the pressure of knowing that ideally you want to be authentic, but maybe you're not being authentic, and just that self pressure that's put on.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
Right. I should be a little farther along in my confidence to be authentic, and I am going to demonstrate that in this setting because I feel I could or should, but I'm afraid for a variety of reasons. It just seems complex.
Yeah. My advice would be to have an experiment and start to do different things and different career interactions, and find out what starts to feel good for you. I think everybody's got that sweet spot, and we're kind of dance around it. And it took me years. I still am figuring that out to this day. As I've become more confident, the goalposts have moved, right? So I think realizing that this is actually a really exciting journey, that we get to ask some very deep questions about ourselves, and about the world that other people maybe don't have to ask. That's actually really fun. And if you can learn to have a little bit of fun with it, it becomes less of a burden. So easier said than done, but it's a gift. The fact that we get to have these questions really is, I'm a better person because of the ways that I've kind of had to struggle. So not a nicely wrapped answer, but that's what I got.
I think we try to tell our students, like, if you're nervous about an interview, just very generally,
Yeah.
like, practice a mock interview, do some informational interviews, go to a career fair, do things where it's okay to fail. And so I think similarly to what you and LeVar are both talking about, it's an opportunity to kind of try out your authentic self when the pressure's not as high as will I or will I not get this job. So that's an opportunity in all things that the Career Center again can support with, and trying to help with those networking opportunities, or come to events like this.
Mhm.
Okay, we got our first question in the chat. Are there any ways in which you have brought your identity into a professional environment that have been beneficial?
I mean, other folks can answer too. Absolutely, for me, right? When you're in the right space, your identity, and I shouldn't say it's not about your identity. It's about the experiences that you have as a result of your identity, the values that you've instilled in yourself as a byproduct of who you are. That's what companies are talking about right now. They're like, we're moving beyond this diversity equals business value, that more Black people equals more money, more gay people equals more money. And we're saying, actually, it is people being able to have identity salience and be who they are, plus empathy, plus trust, plus psychological safety that produces these collisions that lead to these greater outcomes for everybody, both on a personal level and on an organizational level. And I think being queer is a superpower. So if you treat it as such, I think you can walk into any space. And I think it's such a underrepresented viewpoint still today that if you put that card on the table, the right employer is going to say, oh my gosh, thank you. How can we apply this to how we do our products, how we do our services, how we deliver our whatever it is. So absolutely. And if you're thinking that's not possible, I can tell we work with hundreds of people who are using their identity every single day. And they're the ones who are getting the most out of work. They're having a fun time at work, right? Now it's more than a job. Your identity gives you something to, it makes it bigger than a job. It makes it bigger than yourself. And I think that's a good recipe for a more fulfilling, less draining professional life. If that's, it's all draining because working is kind of, whatever, but that would be my response to Skylar.
Other questions? Nick, if folks had questions, how could they reach out to you?
Well, my info is on the Mossier website. Here's my email. And then here's my phone number. Just text me, or call me. I'm like weird kind of millennial. I like to call. So phone me and let's talk about whatever you're working on and what your goals are. And hopefully Mossier in the near future will have our own career coach dedicated to doing this full time. That's on the dashboard. So stay tuned.
Nick, thank you much. Thank you so much for being our partner for these series. Thank you so much for facilitating this workshop and giving up all your time. We love to get to work with you and wish that the Queer Career Fair is a smashing success.
I am so grateful for this partnership, Sam and Emily. Really am. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, LeVar, for, I think, really, again, just really making sure that this conversation matters. Is going to help a lot of people, I think.
With that, we'll stop recording.